At 0847 local time, over the Baltic Sea, a Russian IL-20 reconnaissance aircraft was flying straight toward Polish airspace, recording everything it could capture. The crew had done this dozens of times before: probed NATO coverage, cataloged radar emissions, map response times, routine work. But unknown to the Russians, they'd already triggered something Moscow wasn't prepared for. The scramble order hit Polish air defense at 0849 hours. 2 MiG-29s were wheels up 60 seconds later, afterburners punching them through 400 knots before the gear doors even finished closing. But these weren't the Soviet relics Russia remembered. These were Cold War airframes with Israeli brains and American teeth. And in 9 minutes, they'd proved that Moscow's billion-dollar intelligence operation was flying straight into a trap it couldn't see, outrun, or even understand. The IL-20 was 140 kilometers out now, lumbering along at 350 knots. At their combined closure rate of nearly 1,000 knots, they'd merge in under 9 minutes. The Russian crew had just a few minutes to detect, identify, and evade. They were still recording, pointed at Polish airspace and flying like nothing was wrong. 7 minutes now, then 6. The spy plane's electronic intelligence systems were cataloging every radar emission they could find, completely unaware that 2 fighters were already screaming toward them at full afterburner. The MiG-29s were climbing through 15,000 feet now, throttles firewalled, fuel gauges dropping visibly. At full afterburner, the RD-33s drink fuel at 180 kilograms per minute. The pilots had maybe 11 minutes of combat endurance before they'd need to break off or risk flaming out over the Baltic. But 11 minutes was more than enough for what was coming next. Their response time would be impossible in most fighters, but the RD-33 engines in those MiGs spool from idle to full afterburner in 2 seconds flat. Most jet engines need 8. The difference comes down to bypass ratio. Commercial turbofans run 5-to-1. Meaning 5 parts cold air flowing around the core for every 1 part going through combustion. Quiet and fuel efficient, but sluggish. The RD-33 runs 0.49-to-1, nearly the opposite. When the throttle goes forward, thrust arrives almost immediately. The Soviets designed that responsiveness because they expected to fight NATO on bombed-out airfields with minimal equipment. Smart engineering for a nation expecting to defend its own territory. Too bad it was now being used against them. By 0853, the MiG's radar painted the spy plane clearly. Pulse Doppler processing filtering out sea clutter by measuring velocity. Waves sit still, aircraft don't. The IL-20 emerged cleanly against the noise at 80 kilometers. The original Soviet radar in these jets could track just 1 target while scanning. The Israeli upgraded signal processing handles 10 simultaneous tracks while building firing solutions on the priority threat. Target classification happens automatically. The computer identifies aircraft types based on radar cross-section and flight characteristics. The pilot's display shows blue for friendliness, red for hostiles, all updated via Link 16 data link from every NATO sensor in the theater. 60 kilometers, 5 minutes to visual. The spy plane still hadn't turned and ran, but it's not like it could have anyway. Under the MiG's wings hung AIM-120 AMRAAMs, American missiles that required serious engineering to mount on Soviet pylons. Israel Aerospace Industries installed new ejector racks, ran NATO-standard wiring, and rewrote the fire control software to translate Soviet radar formats into what the missile expects. Real-time conversion during the milliseconds between updates. The AIM-120 is what makes fire and forget a reality. After launch, inertial navigation steers toward predicted intercept coordinates, while encrypted data link updates refine the trajectory. The pilot can turn away. The missile no longer needs him pointing at the target. At 10 miles out, the missile's own radar activates and tracks autonomously. If the target attempts jamming, the seeker switches to home on jam mode, steering directly toward the interference source. Try to blind it and your countermeasures become a beacon. 40 kilometers. The IL-20 had nothing that could defeat this weapon. No chaff effective against modern seekers. No flares, not an infrared threat. No electronic warfare suite worth mentioning. From 60 miles away, an AIM-120 would reach them before they knew it was coming. The geometry was already hopeless. The Russian crew just didn't know it yet. If things went wrong, The crew would have exactly 0 options. The IL-20 is a converted airliner with no ejection seats. It's just a very expensive coffin with wings. But this wasn't a shooting war. Not yet. The Polish flight lead eased back on the throttle, letting the engine settle from afterburner to military power. By 0911 hours, he was close enough for visual identification. That distinctive high-wing silhouette, 4 turboprops turning, the sensor pod under the nose, housing Russia's electronic intelligence array. Inside that IL-20, the SRS-4 ROM was doing exactly what it was designed to do, cataloging every emission it detected. Pulse repetition intervals measured to the microsecond, scan rates, side load patterns, frequency hopping sequences. Each radar type leaves a unique fingerprint, compared against a library of 2,000 known signatures stored in Soviet databases. The ROM operators were probably feeling productive. Comprehensive collection on a hostile fighter, data that would fill reports in Moscow for months. They were cataloging emissions from the N019 radar, which Soviet engineers designed. The Israeli processing behind it had rewritten every signature their library knew how to recognize. Russia was collecting intelligence on their own technology, and none of it would match. The fingerprints they recorded belonged to fingers that had changed hands. The escort became a masterclass in technical dominance. The MiG-29s boxed the IL-20 with geometric precision, rotating positions every few minutes, lead sliding underneath to photograph the belly, wingmen documenting from above. The Russian crew followed their training perfectly. They just were never trained for this. The spy plane flew on for another 11 minutes before finally turning toward Kaliningrad at 0922. Moscow still hadn't found a gap, but they had one more trick up their sleeve, and this one was actually clever. At 0831 on October 31st, 70 hours after the first attempt, another IL-20 appeared on Polish radar. This time Moscow was trying something genuinely smart. The spy plane wasn't heading toward Poland. It was flying northwest along the boundary between Polish and Lithuanian coverage zones, threading the gap where one nation's responsibility ended and another's began. A contact tracked by Polish radar must be reported through Polish channels to NATO headquarters in Germany, then relayed to Lithuanian systems, which acquire independently before responding. Even with digital data links, that handoff takes time. Coordination requires communication. Communication requires authorization. Authorization requires someone climbing the chain of command while the contact keeps flying. Moscow was betting on confusion at the scene. Probe the boundary, force the jurisdictional question, and maybe slip through while two nations figured out whose problem this was. Bureaucracy as camouflage. It was the kind of clever thinking that works great on paper and in planning meetings. The kind of thinking that assures your enemy operates the same way you do. Smart thinking, wrong conclusion. Remember that scramble order at 0833? This was different than usual because the Polish notified NATO headquarters simultaneously with the scramble. This intercept went multinational from the first radar return. 2 MiG-29s were climbing through 10,000 feet by 0834, their pilots watching something the Russians absolutely did not expect. Link 16 symbology showing aircraft launching from Lithuania. Italian Eurofighter Typhoons on Baltic air policing rotation, already wheels up and turning south. The seam wasn't creating a gap. It was creating overlapping response that would have been impassable before. The original Soviet MiG-29 had no data link capability whatsoever. Pilots coordinated by voice, delays, language barriers, miscommunication under pressure, radio calls getting stepped on, controllers trying to manage aircraft they couldn't see. The NATO upgrade changed everything. A fully integrated Link 16 terminal meant these Polish jets could see exactly what Italian jets were doing 200 kilometers away, in real time, without asking. Link 16 is what makes NATO more than a collection of flags at a conference table. The system operates on time division multiple access. Picture a radio channel divided into 128 time slots per second, each lasting 7.8 milliseconds. Polish fighters transmit in certain slots. Italian Typhoons use different slots. Ground radars use others. Nobody talks over anyone else because everyone follows timing synchronized to GPS. During each slot, platforms broadcasted standardized message packets: position, heading, speed, altitude, radar tracks, weapon status, fuel state. The format is identical across all NATO nations. An Italian Typhoon's position report looks exactly like a Polish MiG-29s. When Polish ground radar tagged the IL-20, that track appeared on Italian cockpit displays within milliseconds. No phone calls, no authorization chains. The network handled coordination faster than the Russian crew could ask Moscow for instructions. By 0842, the geometry was brutally clear. MiG-29s closing from the southwest, Typhoons approaching from the northeast. The IL-20 was caught between them like a very expensive clay pigeon. The trap was already sprung. The Russians just hadn't felt the jaws close yet. By 0856, the Polish flight lead had visual through broken clouds, high wing silhouette, 4 props turning, that distinctive sensor pod under the nose. The Italian response came immediately over the NATO frequency. Typhoon flight had the target from the north. 2 languages, 1 tactical picture, 0 confusion. By 0858, 4 NATO fighters surrounded the IL-20 before it reached the boundary it was trying to exploit. The MiG-29s took station off the wings while the Typhoons positioned above and behind, a box formation covering every escape vector. On the left wing, a MiG-29 that Soviet engineers designed, now corrupted by Western technology. The cockpit showed NATO displays where Cyrillic gauges once glowed. Under the wings hung AIM-9X sidewinders. The Russian crew knew exactly what those were. They were the aviation equivalent of watching your ex show up with someone better looking. But these missiles didn't just look better. The AIM-9X uses a focal plane array seeker, like a digital camera turned on for heat instead of visible light. It tracks multiple heat sources simultaneously, selecting the correct target based on thermal signature and motion. But the real nightmare is thrust vector control. Small vanes in the rocket exhaust can deflect thrust, allowing turns that would shred any aircraft trying to match them. The pilot can lock a target 90 degrees off his nose and the missile still tracks. The Polish pilots also wore helmet-mounted displays tracking head position 100 times per second. Wherever the pilot looks, targeting cues project onto the visor. Look at the IL-20, and the AIM-9X seeker head slew to match. No escape geometry exists against a weapon that turns corners while watching you run. Off the right wing, an Italian Eurofighter Typhoon carrying MBDA Meteor missiles. The Meteor uses a ramjet instead of a solid rocket. It breathes air continuously, burning fuel throughout its flight instead of coasting on momentum. The missile accelerates the entire way to target. It arrives faster than it was going at launch, with energy to spare for terminal maneuvering. The Meteor's no-escape zone extends beyond the spy plane's detection range. By the time a Russian crew saw the launch, escape would probably be mathematically impossible. The IL-20 couldn't outrun it, outmaneuver it, or hide from it. Above and behind, 2 more fighters covering every vector. The spy plane couldn't turn, climb, dive, or accelerate without entering someone's weapons envelope. 4 aircraft from 2 different nations, speaking 2 different languages, moving like a single organism. The IL-20 crew had never seen coordination like this. But the escort wasn't just about blocking the IL-20. NATO was about to give the Russian crew a front-row seat to a demonstration they'd never forget. And every second of it would be recorded, transmitted back to Moscow, and filed in briefings that would make Russian commanders very uncomfortable. For the first 10 minutes, the escort looked routine. 4 fighters holding formation, spy plane plodding along, everyone pretending this was normal. The IL-20 sensors recorded continuously radar emissions, communication frequencies, navigation signals, standard collection on a standard intercept. Then the Polish flight lead did something unexpected. He cycled his radar from search mode to track mode to TWS, track while scan, and back again. 3 distinct modes in 15 seconds. The ROM dutifully recorded each transition, cataloging pulse characteristics and frequency shifts. The IL-20 operators probably felt satisfied. Comprehensive collection on hostile radar behavior, the kind of data that fills intelligence reports for months. But they were recording garbage. The Israeli upgrades to the N019 aren't just hardware, they're software-defined. The radar's behavior is controlled by code that can be changed between missions, between sorties, and individual engagements. What the ROM recorded during a peacetime escort wouldn't match what those radars do in combat. The modes, the frequencies, the pulse patterns, all of it configurable, all of it different when the shooting starts. Russia was collecting a snapshot of settings that would never be used against them. The Polish wingman joined in. His radar painted the IL-20 from a different angle, running through its own sequence of modes. 2 MiG-29s demonstrating capabilities in perfect coordination, except the demonstration was deliberate, and the capabilities being shown were the ones NATO didn't mind revealing. Then the Typhoons started their part of the show. The Captor-E radar uses an active electronically scanned array, 1,400 transmit-receive modules that can change frequency thousands of times per second. Unlike mechanical radars that sweep predictably, ASA systems hop across the spectrum in patterns controlled entirely by software. The ROM recorded emissions from the Italian fighters and logged them as comprehensive intelligence. It was anything but. An ASA radar's frequency agility means what you record today tells you nothing about tomorrow. The Typhoon pilots cycled through dozens of modes, search patterns, tracking modes, electronic countermeasure configurations, knowing that every setting they demonstrated could be changed before the next sortie. The IL-20 was collecting a library of radar signatures that would be obsolete before the crew landed, since it was more useful to give them garbage than risk the IL-20 from picking something else up. The Russian operators kept recording. Their system shows successful collection across multiple frequency bands. Every indicator suggested a productive mission. NATO was feeding them noise and calling it dinner. Meanwhile, the real collection was happening in reverse. The Typhoon's Praetorian Defensive Suite was cataloging every mission from the IL-20, the ROM zone transmissions, the radar warning receivers, the communication systems, the navigation aids. Processing power the Russians couldn't match was building a complete electronic profile of Russia's most capable signals intelligence platform. The spy plane had become the subject of its own mission, and the crew had no idea. But radar signatures weren't the real show. That was still coming. At 0901, the escort formation changed. The Polish flight lead dropped back, sliding from the IL-20's left wing to a position directly behind. His wingman simultaneously moved forward, taking station ahead and above. The Typhoons rotated on cue, one climbing, one descending, until all 4 fighters had swapped positions in a coordinated dance that took exactly 8 seconds. The IL-20 crew had just watched a Link 16 handoff in real time. No voice calls, no coordination delays, no confusion about who was covering which vector. 4 aircraft from 2 nations executed a tactical repositioning that Soviet-era doctrine would require minutes of radio traffic to accomplish. NATO did it in silence, their databanks handling every calculation, every deconfliction, every weapons coverage update automatically. The ROM recorded the maneuver, and they realized something deeply uncomfortable. They couldn't replicate it. Russia had nothing like Link 16. Their fighters coordinated by voice through ground controllers, using procedures designed in the 1970s. What NATO just demonstrated wasn't a technology gap, it was a generation gap. The fighters kept demonstrating. At 0907, the formation executed a simulated intercept profile. The MiGs broke left while the Typhoons broke right. All 4 aircraft accelerating away from the IL-20 as if responding to a new threat. 6 seconds later, they reversed, converging back on the spy plane from 4 different vectors, arriving simultaneously in a coordinated bracket that would have given any hostile aircraft exactly 0 escape options. 8 seconds of separation, 6 seconds of repositioning, 14 seconds total to demonstrate a 4-ship intercept geometry that Russian fighters couldn't execute with an hour of planning. The IL-20 sensors captured every detail: flight paths, timing, coordination patterns, weapons envelope management, comprehensive documentation of NATO tactical integration. That was the point. NATO wasn't hiding anything. They were showing off. Every maneuver said the same thing: this is what we can do, and you can't match it. Record everything. Take it home. Let your buddies see what they're facing in the Baltic. The escort continued for another 16 minutes. More formation changes, more coordinated repositioning, more silent demonstrations of integration that Russian doctrine had no answer for. The 47-kilometer extension wasn't spite. It was NATO squeezing every possible second of demonstration time, making absolutely certain the IL-20 had recorded enough material to fill briefings in Moscow for months. At 09:23, the spy plane finally turned east. The Polish flight lead rocked his wings. Pilots speak for better luck next time. Bye for now.